Hi, I'm Anna Hoffman, and welcome to this very special Ask the Experts session called What's New in Azure Data. Now, this session is so special because hopefully most of you just viewed Rohan Kumar, the Azure Data CVP's feature session in the main Ignite stream. Now, if you missed the session or had any issues, it will be restreamed again in about 8.5 hours. So depending on what time zone you're in, that might be reasonable. It will also be hosted as a recorded video later. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Today, I'm joined by many wonderful experts from all over Azure Data, and we're excited to be with you. Go ahead and start putting your questions in the Q&A panel of the Teams live event, and then we'll get started. I just have a few minor things to call out. So remember to use the chat to ask questions, that Q&A tab. These questions are going to appear to everyone once they're approved by our wonderful moderators that are standing by. And we'll answer some questions verbally, and questions that we don't have time for or are very specific, we will try to answer using the chat. Now, as far as etiquette goes, I just need to warn you all that this session will be recorded and is being recorded. So hopefully, if you are not okay with that, then please feel free to drop from the call now. Please try not to spam or be inappropriate with our wonderful SMEs, and adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct. Really, we're just trying to create a respectful, friendly, fun, and inclusive experience for everyone involved. Now, the exciting part, let's meet our experts. So, of course, you've met me, not that interesting today. We are also joined by Ajay Jagannathan from the Azure SQL team, who also leads our migration efforts, Bob Ward from the SQL Server and Azure SQL team, Luis Cabrera from the Azure Cognitive Search team, Matt Usher from Azure Synapse Pathway, Nelly Gustafsson from Azure Synapse Analytics, Pratik Verma from Azure Perview, and Uri Barish from Azure Data Explorer. So we have all these wonderful on-camera experts. In addition to these on-camera experts, we also have experts moderating the chat. So there are lots of places and ways and experts to answer your questions. Okay, so taking a look at the questions, we have quite a few already. Let me take a look at this first one. Okay, so this first one's coming in from Anonymous. I think this might be the best for you, Bob Ward. The question is, what does the future of SQL database maintenance look like? I struggle with reindexing multiple databases in multiple elastic pools, which usually results in a large disparity of used space versus allocated space. So I'm left with scaling up or running some dicey shrink operation.
Yeah, thanks for you guys being here, and thanks for that great technical question just to kick it right off, right, with Ask the Expert. So one thing, and I'm not sure if you're actually doing this or not, but you know, for Azure SQL Database, we do have elastic jobs that allow you to do scheduling of maintenance type operations, such as rebuilding and reindexing. I would say based on the description, though, this doesn't seem very specific to Azure Database, because if as somebody is re-indexing and you're having a large amount of space allocated, but a lot of less space used, I think it has a little bit to do with the index design itself, or you know how it's being implemented in your database. So I would actually take a look back and actually things like a fill factor and things you're actually building your indexes versus something specific that Azure SQL Database maintenance need to be doing. We don't have anything specifically planned for automation of that. Of course, we do have automation of indexes with Azure SQL Database that you can set up in your system. So that is one thing to take a look at, is the automation of indexes we have. But even with that, if you're struggling with these kind of type situations where more space is allocated than used, we'd have to go look at the details of the actual index itself.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. I really appreciate it. This next question is going to be for Pratik. This question says, Azure Data Catalog / Perview and Power Apps Dataverse. Can you talk about Microsoft prescriptive guidance or roadmap visibility on bringing these two universes together?
Sure. So Perview Data Map is designed to scan and catalog all the data at scale from all sorts of data sources. The first iteration is for us to take and connect to Power BI tenants to be able to scan and classify and bring those artifacts into Perview, so you can then start understanding the lineage of the data assets along the artifacts in Power BI along with the data assets they connect to. Once we sort of deliver on sub-artifact level information inside of Perview, we'll be providing prescriptive guidance of how those two things marry together. But the best thing you can do right now is connect your Power BI tenants to Azure Perview, and then you can scan and classify that data sets into Perview at no additional cost.
Awesome, thank you. Here's another question. Let's see, I think Ajay, this might be a good question for you. The question is, we migrated to managed SQL instance. One thing that appears to be missing is a good way to back up and restore either on-premises SQL Server or SQL Azure. Is this a planned enhancement? This is especially true of large databases where a DAC pack doesn't appear to be a good option. Long question.
Yeah, this is definitely a good question, and one of the very common asks from a lot of customers migrating to Azure is, how do you get data back out of Azure? So the native backup restore support is not there today for some technical differences because of version, etc. So we are exploring alternatives on how we can make this easily available. Meanwhile, some of the technologies like replication or other data transfer mechanisms is what we recommend customers use.
Awesome, thanks Ajay. All right, let's look at this question. Let's see, lots of questions coming in, keep them coming in. Okay, so here's a question for you, Nelly. This question is, oh, sorry, I lost it. There's so many questions. Can I use Azure Synapse with Azure Databricks Notebook?
All right, that's a great question. Currently, you can, let's say, as you're working with data from Synapse, you're pretty much working over the data over the lake, right? So technically, if you have your data in the lake, you could work, use, for example, Databricks Notebooks to work over that data, or the Synapse Notebooks. I don't know if that answers the question, but that is one way to achieve that, to pretty much kind of leverage the lake as a data storage for that, and kind of seamlessly work, from either Databricks workspace or the Synapse workspace, whatever suits you best to work with your data.
Awesome, thanks, Nelly. This next question might be great for Luis. I'm not positive if you can take this one, but I'm going to try. So can you share some information about the planned pricing model for semantic search? And maybe this is just more of a docs link type of question.
No, it's a fair question. Right now we went out in preview mode. So from now until April 1st, you can use the capability for free. You have to sign up for the preview first, of course. On April 1st, because people are wondering, hey, so I'm gonna try it, but I want to know more or less how much I will pay. We haven't published the prices because we will publish them once we actually start charging for it. But you will pay based on the number of queries, semantic queries that you issue to the service. So on top of your usual Azure search pricing, based on the number of replicas or partitions that you may have, you will pay an extra amount. Currently, our thinking is about $500 for 250,000 queries that you will pay for your semantic queries.
Awesome, thanks, Luis. This next question is for you, Matt. They say, amazing news with Azure Synapse Pathway. I think they're wondering, how does it relate to SQL Server Migration Assistant? And to some folks, it might be useful, Matt, if you kick off by telling us a little bit more about what Azure Synapse Pathway does, because I know it's pretty new. I think you're on mute, Matt.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's a great question. So Azure Synapse Pathway is a new migration tool for helping customers get from on-premise and cloud data warehouses into the Azure Synapse SQL components. The idea is that the language conversion between systems is really hard and time consuming, and customers spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just trying to convert the table syntax and view and state or procedural syntax from one system to another. So Azure Pathway was introduced to solve that problem, to do automatic language conversion and deployments of that, the converted scripts. It's very similar to the SSMA set of tools, similar in the concept that we're working from, doing at some point a connected assessment experience all the way into doing code conversion and then deployment of those scripts, specifically targeting data warehouse workloads. So the kind of slight variation here is that SSMA is really targeting OLTP workloads, while Azure Synapse Pathway will target data warehousing workloads. The two tools are very similar. They use similar technologies, and a lot of the underlying code is shared between the products, but really they just target different markets.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. I'm just loading up the Q&A. Keep your questions coming. This next question, some of these are hard to decide which SME to pin these on. Let's try this. So this question could have different answers because this isn't necessarily something that's specific to a specific product. This is about CICD. So if anyone feels passionate about GitHub or Azure DevOps, sorry, if you have a preference one over the other or both, please give me a little wave. But the question is, which CICD platform will win for data development and deployments, GitHub or Azure DevOps? Any opinions from our SMEs?
We will lose friends if we answer that question one way or the other on it.
That's fair. I would just like to say that I like using both depending on certain scenarios. That famous answer of it depends. I like to use both. It just depends on what I'm doing. If it makes more sense to go through like GitHub Actions or using Azure DevOps. Okay, we'll try another question. Let's see what we have. This is a question that I don't think Bob Ward can answer, but I'm gonna give you a toss, Bob. People want to know.
Wow, that's such confidence. Thank you.
Can you share any information on the SQL Server next version on-prem?
I get that question all the time. It's okay. I've been getting that question for 27 years. That's all right. Whenever we produced one and we haven't done one in a bit. So it's a fair question for everybody to ask right now. We always innovate SQL Server. We do it all the time, and we see that through Azure SQL. The SQL engine is a core part of what you see today in Azure SQL Database and Managed Instance, even what we've announced for things like Azure Arc. So we're actively thinking about how do we take all that innovation we continually do continuously and bundle that into a next version of SQL Server. But as of today, we're not ready to announce any plans for a specific time frame, version number, etc. But be rest assured, I work directly on the team. We innovated on it all the time. And again, you see the fruits of that in the cloud today.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. We had to try. This next question I think is going to be good for either Ajay. We'll try Ajay first, and if Ajay doesn't know, we'll pass to Nelly. This question is from Eddie. Eddie says, will Synapse ultimately support the linked external data to Azure SQL Database?
Yeah, I can try to answer that if that's okay.
Sure.
You might have heard about Azure Synapse Link that today supports Cosmos DB Analytical Store as a source, which is really neat because pretty much when you're querying Cosmos DB's, like hitting Cosmos DB to access the data for analytics, you're not really putting a burden on the transactional workloads. You're actually hitting the analytical store, which in real time pretty much replicates that data, and then you're reading from that store. I know that the team is, and we've kind of talked about this in previous sessions as well, that and we even have a diagram where we kind of depict to say, there is some future thinking around Synapse Link actually being able to access having a similar setup for Azure SQL DB. I don't know exactly when that's going to land. Even if I did, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you. But that is definitely on our roadmap to have that similar capability, and it's actually asked for a lot by customers. I don't know, Ajay, if you want to add something there.
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty much. And there are some more questions about SQL and Synapse working together, and also questions if SQL will be deprecated and Synapse will be the only service. So the short answer to all of this is no. Our goal is to integrate them, make them work together, because SQL caters to a very specific workload with transactional workloads which come in, and doing analytics on top of that is a very critical scenario. So we are looking to work both ways, right? From SQL to Synapse or Synapse to SQL, that integration will happen.
Awesome. Thanks, Ajay and Nelly. It is great to hear that. This next question is for Pratik, I think. It says, can I store GDPR data or personal data in SQL DB, SQL MI, and Azure Synapse Analytics?
So I can take a stab at what you can do if you store GDPR subject data inside of our data services. With Azure Perview, you can scan and classify that and identify where different types of PII is present in which data systems, so you can put appropriate guard and controls around it. We've seen a couple of banks do that with some sensitive data. So that's something that you can leverage.
Awesome. Thanks, Pratik. This next question is, this is a good one. You know, everyone might have their own answer from their different teams. This is about serverless. So I'll toss this one to you, Bob, first, but if someone else wants to answer after that, feel free. The question is, what Azure data services are recommended to use with serverless architectures?
Yeah, Azure SQL Database has a really great story there. We support, through our general purpose service tier for Azure SQL Database, a serverless compute provision choice. And we've had great success with new customers to the cloud there that aren't really savvy at deciding how many cores do I need? How do I scale? And especially for those infrequent workloads where you have areas of time where you don't even use compute. So you get this great advantage of not just auto scaling from a CPU perspective, but only paying for the compute you use when you need it. So imagine having this ability to pause your SQL server for periods of complete idleness and pay for no compute, just pay for the storage. So we think serverless has got a great future, and it's certainly a big key part of Azure SQL Database.
Thanks, Bob. This next question is going to be great for Uri, I think. This question is Azure Data Explorer ADX dashboards, do they have similar capabilities like Grafana or Tableau in terms of visualization and dashboards?
Thanks, Anna. The ADX dashboard is a native. Hi, Anna. The ADX dashboard is a native dashboard that's like tightly integrated with Azure Data Explorer. It provides the light weight, but still high performance and powerful way to interact with data managed in Azure Data Explorer and be able to move from exploration to dashboarding. Power BI, Tableau, and Grafana offer slightly different nuances and capabilities. Power BI and Tableau are targeted at data analysts. Azure Data Explorer dashboards are targeted and optimized to be able to interact very effectively with data in Azure Data Explorer.
Awesome, thanks for that answer. This next question I think is going to be for Matt. I think you might be typing, but it might be interesting to hear this one out loud. Simon says, how does Azure Synapse Pathway manage between scenarios? Users should be using Spark or serverless pools, or does it always assume a move towards dedicated SQL pools?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I was typing a response here. The way that Azure Pathway today works is it targets the SQL components of Azure Synapse. It assumes that that's a target format. Right now, that's because most of the sources that we're coming from, SQL Server, Snowflake, IBM Netezza, Teradata, really generally fall from a pattern that comes out of that environment and moves into Synapse SQL most commonly. So we started with the most common base, but yes, we do have the intention of being able to take source systems from, or pieces of workloads in a source system and being able to move that into other components like the Spark components within Azure Synapse.
Awesome, thanks. Here's another interesting question. Well, there's so many questions, it's kind of hard to choose. Okay, let's try this one. I'm going to toss this to Nelly because of your experience in machine learning services in SQL Server and Azure Synapse. This question says, is RevoScale R going to be brought into Synapse? I think a follow-on would be, is that necessary? And is any future development going into future versions of SQL? I'm not sure if they're talking about R there, or should I surrender and learn Python?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if starting with focusing on Synapse, there are currently no plans to support the RevoScale libraries today in Synapse, and but we do have plans, on the contrary, to include the R language support on our Spark pool. So that is a separate thing. We do get this question a lot. Customers are a little lost around, if they're already invested in learning and working with RevoScale, what they should do. And so right now, there are no current plans to include that in Synapse, but I do know that there were some announcements planned at Ignite, and I do think that Michelle Wallig was supposed to have a session or something on this topic to present some form of a roadmap for that. So hopefully, that can bring some clarity. I don't have the details of that, unfortunately, and I understand the frustration around that, but we currently don't have any plans for such support. However, if you use Azure SQL Managed Instance and the machine learning services there, you could actually run your RevoScale workloads, R and Python, on SQL Server in Managed Instance using machine learning services. So that is usually the path that I point to customers when they're asking about where to run these, let's say, RevoScale scripts and things that are, they already have invested in a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Nelly. One quick follow-up question on that was about Python support for Python 3.7. Any word on that in Synapse?
We're working on a few upgrades. I know we get the question around Spark 3.0. We get questions about Python. I do believe that the team is working on, bringing in newer versions, both for Spark and for Python. I don't have the details right now, but what I can try to do is that I can try to find that out and maybe type back in the chat exactly details around what version we would be upgrading to. But Spark 3.0 is definitely coming, so that can be one thing. And then on Python, we are working on some form of an upgrade. I just need to verify the version of that before I answer.
Awesome. Thanks, Nelly. This next question, I'm not sure if this should go to, we'll try Luis first, otherwise we'll go to someone else. Luis, can you comment on, do you have any plans for automatic classification and semantic modeling of lake data to recommend semantic models matching either the CDM or customer schemas to assist in data engineering and warehouse modeling?
Yeah, I think that's actually not for me, because it's really about the data lake. It's less about ranking, but more about like a classification model in the data lake, I think.
Gotcha. Any experts or SMEs on the call can comment on that question? Otherwise, we'll try to find someone on chat to get you the answer of your questions. Really loving the energy. There are so many questions coming in. I can barely keep up myself. We are going to work to answer all these questions via chat or verbally, since I probably won't get to all of them verbally, but we're going to keep on rolling. Okay, so a few questions around Perview for you, Pratik. One is, will master data creation and approval process be coming into Perview other than using it for lineage? And then I have another one after that.
Got it. So our aspiration with Azure Perview is to manage all the data governance offering, data governance workflows that you need to solve that are cross-cutting all of the data services. So right now, we'll have a common data map, which is your catalog metadata repository that has a searchable catalog built on top of it. So today, we are shipping the catalog that allows self-service discovery. Over time, we're building data quality, we're building data privacy related workflows, we're building data access management type of controls on top of that UX. For master data management, the current guidance is utilize the data map to manage metadata, and then bring on a partner like a Prophecy or a Tamer to help connect the master data management in comparison of the reference data with the metadata and combine your MDM projects that way. So that's kind of our general thing, guidance right now.
Okay, gotcha, thanks. And then a few questions around connectors. So they want to know about Azure Analysis Services, Dataverse, and Power BI. Yep.
So Power BI is already available today. So you can connect to the Power BI tenant, enumerate all the Power BI artifacts into a Azure Perview tenant. So that's available already for you to try out. The next set of things for Azure Analysis Service. So that is for Power BI Online. We have not yet built a similar capability for Power BI on-prem because it utilizes the admin API from Power BI Online. So we expect that capability, the ability to extract sort of Power BI on-prem artifacts to be developed in collaboration with the Power BI team. So that's kind of on our roadmap. We don't have a schedule on that yet. Dataverse and Analysis Service would be coming after we've completed our sort of Power BI Online and Power BI on-prem scenarios.
Awesome, thanks. This next question, we have a few more minutes. We have a few more questions. I saw a question. I think this one will be for you, Bob Ward. It was about row-level security using Azure RBAC. I've lost the question at this point, but can you comment on it?
I think it's, can we use Azure AD groups to apply row-level security?
Great.
Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, good timing. I was actually responding that on the actual chat. But yeah, you should be able to do that. You should be able to create users, contain users within your Azure SQL database based on an AD group, and then simply go through and use the standard SQL Server techniques to apply row-level security based on those users. So yeah, you should easily be able to do that. I was going to put in some links in there in the response to it as well.
Awesome. So check the responses to see more there. Okay. Here's another question. I think this one would be good for you, Luis. This one says, can I use semantic search capabilities with an existing service, or do I need to create a completely new service?
Oh, that's a great question. No, that's one of the really nice things is that you don't need to reindex your content in order to use semantic search. You simply just change the query. You just say that it's a semantic query and tell us the fields that are most important to you. You tell us the language, and without the need to reindex, essentially it's just changing your API call. Now you get semantic answers and semantic ranking.
Awesome, thanks, Luis. Looks like we might have time for one more question. This question is for you, Ajay. The question says, can you explain more about what was briefly announced for migrating to Azure SQL?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So today we launched a new experience in Azure Migrate. It's a central portal experience for migrating all your assets, right? Whether it's infrastructure, applications, or databases, and more workloads will be added to the mix in future months. So the two main scenarios we are targeting here is customers who are migrating at scale and want to plan their migrations. So we want to give them a comprehensive discovery experience where they can easily discover their SQL Server estate in addition to the other workloads I just mentioned. And it'll give you a detailed report on all the instances, versions, databases, etc. that were discovered. And the next step is to do a deep level assessment as part of that, where we will assess your source instances to look at various features you're using, the workload metrics from a performance perspective, so that we can come up with the right target recommendations. For example, if you need to go to virtual machines, or if you need to go to one of the past deployment options, like managed instance or single database, or if you need to, how do you right size based on the workload usage? So all these goodness, along with the estimated cost, will be available starting today. This is a completely free service. To get started, you can just go to Azure Migrate and launch it from there. And I can also post a link in the chat window for people.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ajay. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We have had so many questions. We're going to stick around and try to answer some of them on chat. If you didn't get your question answered, feel free to find us on Twitter or relocate your questions to Rohan's interview, which is going to be starting in just a few minutes on the main Ignite stage. A few resources for you to continue your learning. And to learn more about what's going on in Azure Data, you should definitely check out our show, Data Exposed. We stream live and we release new episodes every week. And with that, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of Ignite.